Hello, this is Aaron, and welcome back to the podcast. I got a comment on my last podcast from someone who said, Aaron, I missed the glasses. So if you've seen a picture of me on TV or giving a speech, you see that I'm usually wearing glasses, but I don't have glasses when I do podcasts or interviews. So why is that? Well, I got LASIK when I was 32 years old. Before that, I had like horrible nearsightedness, and that was like 2015. So, I was dialed in perfectly. But after about 10 years, I noticed my vision was starting to get a little soft. And so I went to the eye doctor, and what he basically said is, kind of the dirty little secret of LASIK is it only really lasts about 10 years and your eyes start to go soft again. Now, again, maybe that's not true today. It was true when I did it. He's like, you actually have, perfect scarring and all that. So we could actually do a touch-up surgery. But here's the deal. You're getting to the age where you're going to start needing reading glasses. And so if we dial you into perfect 20/20 vision, you're going to need reading glasses right away because you're not going to be able to see close up. Right now, you're slightly nearsighted. And what that means, though, is you really don't need reading glasses. And so that's kind of what I've done. I just decided to get glasses for my nearsightedness, which isn't very bad. I actually don't have a restriction on my driver's license, so I'm able to drive without glasses or contacts. And then I don't need reading glasses close up. But when I'm on the computer or something like that, I'm typically not wearing glasses because I can't really see the screen all that well. It's a little hard, a little stressful. But by popular demand, I am wearing my glasses for this podcast. So those of you watching on YouTube will be able to see it, and we'll just see how it does in terms of my getting the notes. So my special edition podcast I did midweek on the Guardian's attacks against the Moscow, Idaho community, I realized I made like a little error in there, and I called the journalist Jared a couple times when I think his name is Jason. And so, when you're criticizing the journalist for getting it wrong and you make a couple errors yourself, that's never a good look. But as I always say, this is talk radio. This is the genre of talk radio. When I go into, print, I try really hard to get everything right. Of course, everybody makes mistakes. And if you make a mistake, you just have to correct it. So actually, in my American Affairs article, I actually did get one name wrong. And so I went back and corrected. I think that's the thing. You make a mistake, you got to own it, correct it, put all the processes in place to try to prevent it from happening in the future. But that was that. And then someone said, "Hey, Aaron, this movie, The Riot and the Dance, the nature documentary is already out." And I did look it up and see that on Amazon Prime there is something with Gordon Wilson called The Riot and the Dance. So interesting. You can check that out if you want. I went back and looked at the article, and it does say that they are in the process of crowdfunding. So maybe they're doing a sequel. Maybe they're doing more of that. Not really sure there. But want to throw that out there for you. Also got some good feedback on last week's podcast about an elite church for the elite. Some people actually said, hey, here are some elite churches. So one example somebody gave me is Park Cities Presbyterian Church, PCPC, down in the Dallas area. So again, I mentioned Highland Park Presbyterian. Highland Park and University Park are two ultra-wealthy elite enclave suburbs of Dallas. And some people at Highland Park were unhappy that church was still in the PCUSA and ended up splitting away to start their own congregation, PCPC, which is in the Presbyterian Church in America, a much more conservative denomination. It's a big church there, probably about 5,000 members, probably one of the flagships of the PCA. And apparently a lot of the, elites of Dallas went over to that church. So that's a good example. And then I heard about another city that I'm going to remain nameless, that one of the Episcopal churches there, a group of people did leave to split off and start an ACNA congregation, and some of the people from the bluest blood in town went along with them. So I am hearing from some of the elites that went to some of these things, so thank you all. Really appreciate the feedback. And again, just want to briefly again say, during the month of December, I have a limited time special offer for you to become a subscriber or a member of The Masculinist. Now, everything that's free today is going to stay free, even though I'm changing things up a little bit in 2022. So none of you need to give me any money if you don't want to, but I hope you will want to if you're concerned about the things that we're talking about here, because this is the big issues of the day. We're focusing on the stuff that's very important in this world. So I hope you'll become a member or subscriber, because there are great benefits. And again, a limited time offer. So subscribers are going to get exclusive content. You're going to get transcripts of the podcast and the interviews. You're going to get, podcast versions of the first 4 years of The Masculinist as I record them. You'll be able to comment on articles, etc. So that's going to be $5 a month at the end of the month. Normally $10. And then members is you get everything to being a subscriber. We're also going to have some exclusive Zoom events, book discussions. We're going to have a private chat group. A lot of great stuff there. In fact, I'm thinking about doing the first member Zoom event on December 20th, so stay tuned for that. If you're already a member, if you'd like to get on it, please do. Again, through the end of the month, that's going to be $35 a month, and in January, it's going to go up to $50 a month. So again, thank you for considering. I hope you will become a supporter. If you need to do that, do it two ways. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/masculinist, sign up there, or do it on Gumroad, gumroad.com/masculinist, hit membership. It'll all be there. Thank you very much. Today, I want to follow up with my series on elites and probably bring it to a close. This may be a theme that we'll return to again and again. I am not a populist in the sense that I do not believe, essentially government by the masses or leadership by the masses is really a practical thing to do. All societies, all institutions are led by elites, and the character of the elite counts for a lot. So elite theory is something that, I've studied a bit. Again, I'm not going to claim to be an academic expert on it, but, from my articles on Digby Baltzel and stuff, I've done some reading in this field. And so I'm going to keep returning to it because it's a very important topic. And again, today I want to talk about, though, this idea of it's easy to criticize the elite, but are you willing to become an elite? Are we willing to be elite? And so let me give you an example. Back in August 2020, the Gospel Coalition published an article called Why I Hate August by someone named E. Edward Copeland. And this article was about racist killings of unarmed, innocent black men or black boys by the police or various other people. So he talks, for example, about Emmett Till. I'm sure you know about Emmett Till, but if you don't, you should familiarize yourself. Go to Wikipedia, check it out. And then he gets into a bit about Kyle Rittenhouse. And so I want to read a paragraph out of this article. He says, Kyle Rittenhouse killed people in the middle of the street, on camera and in front of witnesses, and then, smoking rifle at his side, casually strolled past law enforcement. He didn't run away. He didn't hide. He showed no fear. He assumed there was something about his person that would allow him to approach law enforcement with a visible semi-automatic weapon that had just taken lives and lived to tell about it. More than a few witnesses pointed out that he had just shot several people, yet he was able to leave the scene in the state. When armed mass shooters, Kyle Rittenhouse, Dylan Roof, etc., are apprehended without incident and unarmed black people are killed out of fear that they might be armed, we have a more insidious problem than a few bad apples. This thing is cultural, pervasive, and abominable. Unquote. So the article went on to compare Kyle Rittenhouse to Jacob Blake, who was a black man who was shot by the police in Kenosha right before all the riots broke out. And, why did the cops shoot Blake, he asked, who was unarmed, but they didn't shoot Kyle Rittenhouse, who was armed? Well, it turns out Jacob Blake actually was armed. But I think that's a legitimate comparison and topic to cover. If you want to contrast, hey, let's talk about Kyle Rittenhouse versus Jacob Blake. How did one guy end up shot, the other guy didn't? I think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to bring up. But listing Kyle Rittenhouse, who acted in 100% legitimate self-defense against other white people who were trying to kill him, with Dylan Roof, who deliberately massacred a bunch of people out in a black church out of racist motives, it's just unconscionable to even do that. In my personal opinion, it's libelous to say Kyle Rittenhouse, Dylan Roof, right? Two totally, completely different situations, right? That part of the piece never should have been published, and it attracted big criticisms at the time. And then with Kyle Rittenhouse's recent acquittal, there's been another big push to get the Gospel Coalition to retract this article and to apologize for it. Okay, so there's even a Twitter account called Has TGC Apologized Yet? It's at TGC Apology if you want to check it out. And the Gospel Coalition did make a couple of corrections. So they put an editorial note that Jacob Blake actually turned out to be armed, and then they deleted the word mass killer instead of I was like a armed mass killer, or however they originally did it. They deleted the word mass killer. I think out of a technicality that the definition a lot of people use in mass killings or mass shootings is shot 4 or more people, whereas Rittenhouse only shot 3 people. So it's kind of treated as a technicality. They removed it and said it was sort of an editorial oversight. So that's basically the situation. There's been a ton of pressure put on them. Now let's look at this from the Gospel Coalition perspective. Now again, I would just say flat out, the part listing Dylan Roof with Kyle Rittenhouse never ever should have been published. So I think that's objectively bad to have ever made it in there. However, we don't actually know the arrangements that exist, at the Gospel Coalition. So this Edward Copeland guy was a Gospel Coalition council member at the time he wrote this, I believe. He used to be a council member for sure, and now he appears to no longer be a council member. Not sure what's up there. But, it could be that part of being on the TGC council is you essentially get posting rights on the site, right? And so you can post whatever you want. So maybe he just had the right to put up whatever he wants because he's a council member. I'm not saying that's the case. I don't know. But I'm just saying there's probably some things about the exact nature of how this thing came to be that, we don't know. It would be very hard, even if you're the editor-in-chief, to say, I'm going to reject the article by somebody who's on the board that oversees the organization I work for. Hard to do. And we see today, right, that you always see this. Somebody says something wrong, they sort of, step in it, or maybe they even just phrase something inartfully, or maybe they violate one of the little, ideological litmus tests of our society. And all of a sudden there's a course. You must disavow, you must fire, etc. And, so do you really throw one of your own people to the wolves who are coming after you sort of thing? I think conservatives have done that a lot. And I've criticized it. And so, from a standpoint of, of Gospel Coalition, I think they probably, what they probably should have done, quite frankly, is immediately when that thing out and there was criticism, they should have said, yeah, gone to the author, let's just take this out, get it corrected, get over it. They didn't do that. Now they got a problem. But again, the people who are opposed to the Gospel Coalition are putting pressure on them, and they probably don't want to give them a win, right? So, you can kind of understand that a little bit. Even if you can say objectively in this situation, it's absolutely terrible, okay? So we had to look at this from an institutional perspective. But here's why I bring this up. Let's say my phone rings this afternoon and I answer it and I get a call. It's like, hey, Aaron, this is Julius Kim, president of the Gospel Coalition. Colin Hansen has just accepted a new job as the editorial director at Zondervan, and so the editor-in-chief job at Gospel Coalition is open, and, well, would you like to come take that job? Would you like to be the new editor-in-chief of the Gospel Coalition? And so, do I want to be the editor-in-chief of the Gospel Coalition? If somebody offered me that job, would I take it? And realistically, the answer is probably not. That's not a position that's really high on my list. And I think, this becomes part of the challenge that we have with institutions and elites. And I talked before about inside game versus outside game. And you need both, right? You need people who are embedded in institutions, and you need people who are outside of institutions because they have their own strengths and weaknesses. But at some point, right, we who are at some level critics of some of the existing elites and institutions, we need to be willing to sit down in the chair and assume the responsibilities of leadership if those opportunities come our way. So for myself, if someone came to me and said, Aaron, we're going to offer you position X, I have to be willing to give strong consideration to taking that job Now, so something I would just do. Obviously, I'm working with a lot of people. There's things going on. We'd have to have conversations about that. But okay, yeah, you have to be willing to consider it, because if all we're going to do is sit on the outside and take pot shots, but we're not willing to actually occupy leadership roles, not actually willing to take elite positions and deal with all of the institutional constraints and considerations and stuff like that comes with it, then we're probably not going to have the elites that we want. So I think that, we need to be building up, right, a cadre of people who are both qualified to take these jobs, which is a challenge in and of itself, and willing to accept them when they come together, maybe even seek them out. Even the Bible says, he who wants to become an elder, desires a good thing, something to that effect. Right? There's nothing wrong with having a desire to occupy a leadership or an elite position. And by the way, this is why Donald Trump's staffing decisions in his administration were so outrageous. Again, you can bring in people at the cabinet secretary level, often with no prior government experience. Sometimes there'll be like a CEO or someone like that who gets hired as a secretary of the Treasury, or a Goldman guy comes in there. But typically, if you want to get a mid to senior level position in the government, you have to have held positions in the government before. Right? You have to, if you want to be Senate confirmable at level X, you probably need to have come in at a Senate confirmable level down below. And so Trump had the opportunity to have brought in an entire group of his MAGA supporters who would have gotten government experience that would have then credentialed them to take next level positions in a future administration. And instead, he didn't hire those guys. He hired all the people who were never Trumpers. So now this is the problem for any would-be reformer, Democrat or Republican. You need to fill thousands of positions in government, but the only people who have the experience and qualifications to take those jobs are establishment people. And Trump had the opportunity to have started building, a pipeline of people to take these positions, and he didn't do it. And that is, basically at the end of the day, almost unforgivable, and the biggest opportunity lost out of his administration in a lot of ways, from the standpoint of people who want to see change in the Republican Party. So, we're probably not going to be able to move directly to the most senior positions. You got to be willing to say, hey, I have to get experience at level X, then I can move up to level Y, then I can move up to level Z. But the point is, if you're not even willing, right? Imagine that Trump administration calls somebody up and says, do you want to take this job as such and such? And you say, no, I don't really want that. Trump, he's kind of, what about my reputation? All my friends are going to like me. Am I that? Well, that's a legitimate thing to say. But then again, the next time there's a Republican and everybody who gets staffed is just, the son-in-law of some, third generation neocon, don't be surprised, because that's who has those positions. So it's very easy to sit on the sidelines. It's very easy to make peace with being a dissident. It's very easy to become comfortable with being in the subaltern outsider position and never take the next step and say, hey, why don't we become the top people, right? Why can't we be the top people? And again, probably right now, if you're like, a Christian person of traditional, solid Orthodox beliefs, your ability to get top positions in the cultural center is limited. You're probably not going to do that. However, maybe there's a lot of things you could do. Maybe you could be on a school board. Maybe you could be an elder in your church. Maybe you could be a volunteer leader at your local farmer's market. Maybe you could be on the local zoning board. There have to be positions in leadership that you could take on and start gaining them and start being the elite you want to see in the world. Again, we need to be the elite we want to see in the world, because if we're not willing to occupy those positions, if we're not willing to do it, then who is, right? And when you take a pass on the opportunities and you say, well, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this, then, you kind of lose some of your ability to forfeit. Now, I would say I am being a leader. I'm trying to be an intellectual leader. I'm trying to be a leadership in certain domains. So not everything involves institutional leadership. There's scientific research leadership, elite there. So there are many different forms of leadership. Part of what I'm doing here is to say, I'm going in here talking truth as I see it and, really trying to advance the ball. So I'm not saying I'm not doing anything, but even for myself and as for all of you, are we willing to step up and be in an institutional role and maybe in a place where, it's not as pure to your way of thinking as you might like? Again, be on your local city council. You got to deal with all the junk that comes with that. Maybe you could do that. So we need people who are competent, who are courageous, yet who are also, prudent, who are aligned with the truth, and who are interested in advancing our values in society, in our community. We need people like that to step up and start being elite, leadership-minded. Right? Now, that doesn't mean we all have to be all leaders all the time. As I always say, sometimes in my church, because of what I'm doing here, I've deliberately said I don't want leadership positions in a church because to take a leadership position in a church, my writings and things like that just gives a vector for people to attack the church. And, but then again, if someone asks me, maybe I should be willing to do that. But I always say, we do need to be followers in some domains. We have to be good followers. If you're not a good follower, you're not going to be a good leader. So we have to master followership as well. We do need sort of dissident critiques, but we need people who are willing to step up and assume the responsibilities of elite positions. So we need to be developing people like that, and we need people who are actually taking those roles and then executing in a better way than the people are there now. And so that's what I would say. Think about it. Think about how you can start becoming the elite you want to see in the world. And again, thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.